Starting with this game against Richard Fauber, as you can see, he was a Class A player. He was from Madison, Wisconsin, the capital city of Wisconsin. He was born March 22nd, 1936, and he passed away on March 2nd, 2013, just 20 days shy of his 77th birthday. Bobby Fischer, you'll recall in his youth, was playing a lot of King's Indian attacks, and that's what he plays here, beginning with Richard Retti's opening, knight f3, knight f6. Now g3 is the King's Indian attack. g6 is the symmetrical defense, bishop g2, bishop g7, castles, castles, d3, d6, e4, e5, and now queen's knight to d2. That is also mirror imaged by Fauber, so we have an ultra-symmetrical, although the most frequently played move in this line is actually knight c6, breaking the symmetry. Fauber decides to copy Bobby's cat. a4 by Bobby Fischer, rook e8. Knight c4, opening the door for the bishop to finally come out. So h6 was played, prophylactically preventing bishop to g5. My inclination would have been to open the door for my bishop and try knight b6, which puts the question to white's knight. I get a thumbs up from the annotator for this idea. h6 by Fauber. Now knight e1, and the idea of knight e1 is to maintain control of this diagonal while getting out of the way of the f-man. Bobby wants to push that pawn, no doubt, to the f4 square. I actually thought a5 might be stronger here. Let's see what I get for this. Continuing with the idea on the queen's side, I do get a check mark. Knight e1, knight f8 does open the door for the black queen's bishop. Even here, I think knight b6 was probably preferable. I do get a check mark there as well. Well, f4 as predicted, although I might prefer to go ahead and play bishop d2 first. You see, I get a star for that. But Bobby just jumps right in with f4, not liked by the bot. Well, Fauber does not capture that pawn, although it's probably best. Instead, he tries d5, hitting the knight. And that gets the big red X with the indication of pawn takes pawn indeed being the optimal move. That would result in the rook takes the pawn. And after d5 here, okay, the bot prefers to capture with the bishop. Yeah, I guess so. Then pawn takes, knight takes, yeah. Then you have to retreat your rook. Fauber jumping the gun with d5. So Bobby opens the f file with f takes e5, attacking the knight, which is a counter to black's attack on white's knight. Black captures the knight, as does white. Then bishop takes the f-man, leaves the h-man hanging, and Bobby captures that. Although I don't know if that is the best bet because it leaves the b-man hanging. So I might prefer to blunt the diagonal with c3, although the bot says no, capture that pawn, that is the best move. So bishop takes b2 is played, and now the queen would love to come in with a check here. Rook b1 hits the bishop, and okay, maybe use the bishop for the check, but he played bishop g7. The bot calling for bishop h8. What does it think about bishop d4 check? It forces king h1. It calls it inaccurate. It forces king h1, and then perhaps you could get some Harvard's bishops lined up. All right. Apparently my entire idea is inaccurate. It's being frowned upon by the bot. Bishop g7 is the move that Fauber played, and those bishops were traded. Now queen f3 getting a battery attack against the f-man, marked as inaccurate. Bot calling for d4. I will point out that grabbing this pawn is even worse, as it creates Swiss cheese in the pawn structure. And black would likely trade queens and then develop his bishop and aim at that isolated pawn. d4 is the optimal move and gets an exclam. I wanted f6 here, and I do get a star for that, but defending with development definitely makes sense. Queen e7 was black's choice, and now d4 is played. You still want to resist the nonsense of pawn takes pawn. d4, knight e6, attacking the d-man. The bot preferring pawn c5. It should be noted that knight d7 would be answered by queen c3. Or maybe not. I'm getting a question mark there because of c5. I mean, I'm lining up with the king is my point. Or maybe I just take this pawn. I'm not sure why it gets a question mark. Anyway, knight e6 by Fauber and queen c3 by Bobby here, which definitely threatens to win because that would be a discovered check and a simultaneous hit on the knight. You don't want to play the d4, the d5 first, though. Let me put this up here. That's a mistake because it allows the knight access to the c5 square. And this is an important lesson that these side-by-side pawns create a barrier here. And so you would definitely want to move the queen first and then push the pawn. Anyway, queen c3, threatening the d5 push. Knight g5 gets out of harm's way, and so no need to push the pawn, capture the hanger. Bishop h3 by Fauber. Rook takes the b-man, pinning the c-man, and that gets a question mark. I kind of liked this move. The bot not liking it. It's also a super attack against this pawn. Bishop takes the bishop, and knight takes the bishop. Now queen takes the e-man. And that's a mistake. Rook e b8 is the way to keep the table level. And the idea of rook e b8 is to try to entice white to capture the c-man, which is now a mistake. For if you play rook takes c-man, there's a Zwischenzug here with knight h3 check, and after king h1, knight f2 check, and ooh, double exclam. Well, the point is that this rook is tied to the first rank. So if you take my knight, first of all, if I come back, you just repeat. So there is a repetition possible here. Let's just put that up. So you can see it would be a drawer by repetition. And look, every time you play it, you get the double exclam. So that's 2 double exclams for the price of 1. Or if you take the knight, then rook b1 check. Yeah, so if I play here, queen takes c7, and if I can't queen takes queen or I'm mated. So I'd have to play here first, decoying the rook. And the reason that works now is now on queen takes c7, I can queen takes queen because my king has a fleece square. Whereas with the knight here, I'm trapped by my own piece. All right, that's a lot of sideline there. But definitely the best way to keep the table level was king's rook to b8. Instead, queen takes the E-man was played, and therefore rook takes the C-man is definitely available with a major super attack against the F-man. Black has to be concerned about H4 deflecting or displacing the defender of the F-man. Now, you could still put a rook on B8 here. It might be the most hopeful choice, hoping for rook takes the A-man. Just say, oh, I'll come here, and oh no, I hung my pawn. But of course, white wouldn't do that. White would just play rook takes pawn check. Let me show that line. It wasn't played. On rook A B8, black would hope that, hey, I left my pawn hanging, please take it. And that, of course, is a blunder because now I can hit the queen. And you can see the eval bar is dead center. But obviously, white doesn't have to capture that pawn. He can capture this pawn, ladles and jelly spoons. Check. Ooh, I guess that's a mistake. I don't understand. Why is that an error? Okay, my thought was he's got to play king h8. King g8 does not work because he loses his queen. I just come over and I win the queen. So he'd have to play king h8. Why is it a mistake? Oh, you could play king h6. I see. Well, my thought here, regardless of king h8 or king h6, was pawn h4. Either way. And you can take me, but now I've got this really lethal battery, and that's going to be checkmate. So I'm not sure why that's a mistake. You know, it doesn't matter since rook a b8 was not played. Queen e2 was played, allowing queen takes queen, rook takes queen, pawn h4, putting the question to that knight, which is the sole defender of the pawn. Well, I mean, yeah, the king's defending, but kings are not effective defenders. They're only effective as a last line of defense. So check can't be good here. King h2, knight f2. I see. Okay. That's a good try. I overlooked that. Knight f4, rook d2, king g1, getting out of the line of fire. Knight g4, bot calling for knight e4. Knight e4 is going to be answered by knight e6 check. And then after you get out of check, I gobble up that pawn with pigs on the 7th. And it's just a matter of mate in 1, 2, 3 moves because my knight cuts off the flea square over here. Knight g4 was played. Knight e6 check was played anyway. King h8, rook takes pawn, and Fauber resigned the game. You can see the same checkmate is being threatened here. The only way to prevent rook to h7 is to give away your knight. And if you give away your knight, that only delays the inevitable because I'm going to come right back. Well, the bot says, no, don't take the free knight. Well, it's clear that I'm winning all day. Now, he could take a pot shot here and go for a ladder checkmate, but I'll just rook f2 and give myself a hiding place. And I'm up a knight and several pawns. I'm going to win this game for sure. You can give me your check all day long. I couldn't care less. And now, what are you going to do? You're not going to do anything, bro, because you can't avoid, you have to trade. Because if you don't take, you're checkmated in one, so you have to take. And I'm up a knight and 3 pawns. I'm winning this all day.